The following is a production of the Dallas Genealogical Society. For more information, please visit our website at dallasgenealogy.com.
Okay, let me go ahead and welcome everybody to our January meeting. Happy 2021. Hope you had a good, productive, and safe holiday season. We're glad to have you back with us again. I'm Bernard Meisner, one of your co-chairs, and you can see Ann is on camera there as well. She'll be doing all the technical side of things this month. We sort of switch those off. And we're always looking for other folks to help volunteer with our group. We are all volunteers. And also, anybody has any suggestions for topics for future meetings? Again, we have the caveat, we have no funds. So anybody we get has to work just for the pleasure of our company. And we do typically meet at 10:30 Central Time on the second Saturday of the month. That changes on occasion if the Dallas Society, who typically meets on the first Saturday, for some reason has to move to the second. Then what we often do is move to the afternoon of the second Saturday. And when we started this, we actually physically met at the library, in addition to always webcasting live, and we do record these sessions as well. And sometime, somewhere in the future, the library will be open again, and we'll be all able to go there and visit. But even on those cases, if for whatever reason you can't be there, as I said, we do webcast live the meetings as well. We have a Facebook group. You can see that link there. And then this is the long link to our special interest group page on the Dallas Society website. Typically, if you just go to dallasgenealogy.com, you can navigate to us as well. And that's where we do post the recordings as also the handouts. We have two handouts today to accompany this one presentation. One is just a basic handout with the primary notes you'd probably want to take if you were writing along with us. And the second one is a list that I'll mention during the presentation of all the websites I could find that have surnames available through them. And it's a semi-extensive list, as best I could find. I do have a copyright on that. I've been putting this together for about 3 months now, and I hope you do respect that copyright, because I do go around and give these talks to local societies and the state conferences as well. So I'd like to still have that opportunity. So we'll start with some upcoming online presentations and sort of mark the kind of dates for next week. There'll be stuff on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then on the Wednesdays of the following weeks, and then a couple in February as well. We'll post all these to the Facebook groups, and it'll be in the recording, so you don't have to frantically try to write down a bunch of URLs. First, we have Catherine Schrober from SK Translations. Right now, she's been offering free recorded sessions of 2 of her presentations. There's one going on right now, in fact. She offers them several times during the week. They are recorded, but as she notes at the bottom there, if you ask questions during those recorded sessions, she reviews those and gets back to you. And she has 2 books and a couple classes that she offers. And usually if you attend her website or webinars, you can get a discount, and she does that as well. So the first one she'll be doing next week, Tuesday and Thursday. There'll be other sessions as well as on top websites for the old handwriting. And then the other one she's doing is her 5 types of German genealogy documents as well. So those are things that would be available next week. And it's been ongoing for the last couple of weeks. She's been doing those. So there's lots of opportunities. The Family History Library has a series of webinars as well. And Dr. Roger Meinert, a well-known expert in German genealogy, has 2, one next Wednesday on census records. He just recently wrote a book all about the fact that, yes, in fact, there are census records in Germany. They tend to be at the local level. And he actually spent a year's sabbatical from the university over in Germany finding a lot of those census records. And then 2 weeks after that, near the end of this month, he'll be doing one on residential registration in Germany, something we're not familiar with here. When I live in Bedford, and when I moved to Bedford, I didn't have to go to the police and say, "Hi, I'm Bernard. I used to live here, and now I'm moving here," and get registered. But in many other countries, that is the case, which for us genealogists is a great way to have records. And also note at the bottom at the BYU Family History Library site, they do have recordings of some past webinars as well. Then the German Genealogical Society has two, one this month, one next month. One will be next Thursday, doing German research online, which is what we're all sort of limited to right now with all the libraries and archives closed. And then next month, Diane Schmidt will be offering one looking for her relative Johann Schmidt. And that's, the German equivalent, I guess, of John Smith, and how many thousands of them, how do you find the right one? We will point out that if you become a member of the Germanic Genealogical Society, you can get access to the handouts that accompany these presentations. And also they have previously recorded sessions that you'd have access to. And again, we'll put links to all these in our on our Facebook group. The St. Louis Genealogical Society has one next Wednesday as well, or Wednesday the 20th, Wednesday week after next, on building a family to find records. What happens if your ancestor didn't have any U.S. family? Then, of course, you use the fan club. So that will be offered as well in a week and a half. And then Catherine will be doing an actual live presentation to the Appleton, Wisconsin Public Library, but they have made that available, the link to anyone. And again, it's tips and tricks for deciphering foreign language records. So there's lots and lots of presentations out there if you haven't had enough webinars already and you're not getting saturated. So again, we'll put those in the Facebook group as well. We have our local society here, us folks, having our next meetings. Our next meeting will be on Saturday, March 13th, and that'll be Natalie Ingeborg, who is now in the Metroplex area, and she'll be talking about surnames, homelands, and occupations of our ancestors. So talking about, again, trying to find the ancestor's place of origin and how sometimes occupational names become surnames. And I think I have one or two examples of that as well in today's presentation. And then our main meeting is going to be an open discussion. So Ann and I are going to let you folks do the work, or at least provide some of the subject material. We want to hear about your recent German genealogy discoveries of places, events, records maybe you found, some of your successes. You've broken through a brick wall. Maybe you're facing a brick wall and are looking for some guidance or suggestions or general questions, needs, or requests. So that will be at our May meeting. And again, our Facebook group, we encourage a number of you to join us. We have some folks on there. We'd like to have more. And this just gives you indication of some of the recent posts that have been on the site. Additional information you can get by just becoming a member. You do have to, it's a group, a closed group, so you do have to answer a couple questions. And Tony will quickly check that out and then allow you to join us. So again, encourage you to join the Facebook site as well. Again, there is the link for the Facebook, or you just look for German Genealogy Group of North Texas. And again, we also have our website where we have our special interest group page. And that's again where you can find the recordings of our previous meetings and copies of the handouts, including the two handouts that will go with this meeting. And Ann is going to add those to the chat, the links to those as well. Okay. So let's go ahead and start talking about surname maps. I will ask you hold your questions to the end, but then we'll have time to take them. This is, again, something I've been working on the presentation for several months and have been using Surname Maps for a while. And you can see they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. So what are they? They will depict concentrations of residents with a particular surname or set of surnames. So to create one of these, you need a list of people and where they are. A number of surnames do have regional distribution patterns where if you know the name or how the name is spelled, assuming your ancestor knew their spelling of the surname, where they may have come from. And that can help you focus on your research. If you have no other way of knowing what the hometown was and your ancestor had a somewhat unique surname, not a Schmidt, then there's a good chance that you might be able to at least zoom in on a part of the land. And I'll show you a couple examples of that. It works best for the less common surnames, and families stayed on the same location. That would often be particularly true of farmers because you inherited the land, you could continue to stay there and work on the land. Sometimes the surname websites will also just suggest some alternate spellings of the names. Again, in many cases, some cases at least, probably less so in Germany than my Irish ancestors, knowing how to spell the name, and then they're giving the name to someone who's making the document, the record, and that person is writing what they hear, which may not be what your ancestors said. And then if you're working on indexed records, then the person who's the indexer is coming back trying to read the handwriting of the person who wrote what they thought they heard. So you can get variance. So there's always a thing of, is there a correct way to spell your surname? Not really. And sometimes you want to find the spelling of the friends, associates, and neighbors who are on the records, because if you can't trace your ancestor, maybe you can trace one of their friends and see where they came from, what they were doing, and that might provide you some new links to your relatives. Just a little bit of terminology. We'll just put in there, there'll be no tests. This is a scholarly discipline, studying surnames, and people get PhDs in surname research, write dissertations about it, and onomastics is the official name. In genealogy, you may have already heard the term a one-name study group, and this is a of people who share the same surname. That doesn't mean they all have the same ancestor. You know, if your name is Smith or something like that, there's probably lots of different places the name came down from, but at least this is a grouping of people, often tied in with DNA as well, a one-name study group. So in terms of organizations, there's an international council, there's the Guild of One-Name Studies, the Surname Society, American Name Society. Britain and Ireland have societies as well. And I'll show you in a bit, there's been a big scholarly project done in Germany over the last decade. In terms of Facebook groups, there is a Surname Distribution Maps group. And I did find two Irish groups. One is just Irish, the other is Ulster. I haven't found any specific just for German surnames. Now, here's something I consider particularly important. If you're going to use a surname map, and often you use any kind of record, you want to ask some questions about that record before you use it. The first thing you may want to ask is, well, where are they getting the data? And again, for surname maps, you need a name and a location that you can map the name to. Then you have to ask what time period. Is it something recent or is it historic? Is it from this century, the last century, the 1600s in a couple cases? What's the spatial resolution? Some are, I'll show you one example, is this course is just what country? Oh, they're from Germany. Well, that doesn't really help much. But others will give the state or province, or for here will be the county, the city, and sometimes postal, or if it's a phone book, area code. I just saw Dallas is getting a 4th area code starting next week, I think. And then the data quality. Are they looking at family names, or are businesses getting incorporated as well? For example, if I look at the German telephone book and look for my surname Meisner, one of the things that comes up is the Meisner Butcher Shop. Well, that may be an old name of the original. We don't know if there are Meisners there now. In this particular case, you can see in the box on the left, you can separate out the private, which are probably individuals, versus the commercial. But when you're looking at a surname map, you want to ask, well, where are you getting this data? And then what do they do in name variants? As we said, there's lots of different ways to spell a name. And when you're looking at a surname map, are they all grouped together, or are they treated separately? And we'll see in most cases, they tend to treat them separately, although there are instances, some sites let you combine a couple different spellings. Then you have to ask, what are you looking at on the map itself? Probably most important, are they just counting this is the total number of people with that name in that particular place? And then if you do cities, if I look for all the Joneses who live in Dallas, I'll probably get thousands. If I look in Smith County, I may only get hundreds, but proportionately, if I look at the relative frequency, it may be a much more common name in a more remote rural area. So you have to look at which kind am I looking at, or do you get the choice? How are they showing it in terms of the symbols, colors, circles, names, whatever, and the all important legends, and how can you deduce exactly what do those symbols mean? Now you'll run into a couple different types of surname maps. Some of them are these area fill maps where there's a legend on the left, and you can see the light green is up to 5, and then dark green is up to 10, and like it gives you an idea of, in this case, this is the absolute distribution in Austria of the name Schmidt. So that may have problem with getting a real intensity of the distribution determined from that. Others, and you'll see there's a number of sites that do this sort of thing, is the proportional symbols with these different sizes of circles. And then you get in place here in Belgium, and you're really trying to figure out which are the locations that have the most people. It can be sometimes difficult to sort that out. And then this is Sligo County in Ireland, one of the more aesthetically pleasing and least useful maps that are out there. This was done by the folks at Esser. They do a lot of GIS work. And these are actually births from 1890. My O'Hara's sort of highlighted there in red. A number of them came from that county, but that's the resolution. All this map is telling you that somewhere in the county or scattered throughout the county are O'Hara births in 1890. It's not that particular location. So again, you need to do some background investigation before you use any source of information. So let's look at some examples. Maybe one of the more simpler ones is on Family Search. The accounts there are free. We encourage you to get one because that helps them with the record keeping when they're trying to get other folks to add their records to the site. But it's the all about me part. And you can put in your name and your birth year and where you're from. And they've changed this in the last month. This is the latest version. I had to update my slides. And it has all sorts of things. And this is geared, I think, particularly to younger folks, trying to get them interested in their family history. So the year you were born, who was the college baseball champion? Well, I'm a genealogist, not quite of interest to me. But in the upper left, first you can look at the name, meaning, and origin. In our case, I look at my Bernard. It has a German origin from Bernhard and has the Gaelic forms as well, and some possibly related names. Again, it's giving me some alternate spellings I may want to search with. And in the case of Meisner, it does point out it's German and Ashkenazi Jewish. This site doesn't even give me other than the double S as opposed to the single S alternates. Then also there on the All About Me, you can say, where in the world does your name come from? And this is not a course, it's just on the global scale. And it tells me for Meisner, 20% of the records, and it comes from the family search family tree. So these have all been contributed by people who add to the tree. 20% of the Meisners on the tree have United States locations, another 20% in Germany, and then we have some Canada, but that's pretty coarse resolution. If I look at the alternate with the double S, I find that's most popular in German and less popular in the United States, and there's a few of them in Austria. So again, you do the evaluation, and I've done this for you, and this is all in the handout on the table. This comes from the family search family tree, so it's all time periods. It's pretty coarse resolution. It will not be business names. We've seen that the variants are treated separately. They only show you the absolute depiction and in the colors with the little legend. Now, Ancestry has one as well. And again, you don't have to have an Ancestry account to access this. Under their Learn Facts, you can put in your name, as I did. We say the same sort of thing in terms of the meaning, although it gives me a lot more suggested alternate spellings and pronunciations that I may want to research. And they have records from the US Census in this case. You can also do this on the Canadian and UK versions of Ancestry, but each of those only have one census. So it's rather limited. So here in 1840, where are the Meisners? And if you read the fine print at the bottom, there's one living in the Indiana, one family, and that's about half. Well, it's exactly half. And another state, Ohio, has the other one in 1840. And then you look at the legend on the right, and I'm sort of asking, which color is Indiana and Ohio? So I actually went through and checked, and that's their two. So while they have one family in each place, there must be a husband and wife, or a mother and son, father and son, something that way. You can also look at the name variant. This is the Meisner with the double S, and they're in New York and Pennsylvania in 1840. Then we can go up to 1880, which is the next option. And you can see there's a lot more Meisners now. And you can sort of mouse over and see the biggest number is in fact in Missouri. And 79 of the 483 that Ancestry has in their records. And that's about 16%. And then we can up it, and the other option is 1920, and now you can see there's a lot more Meisners, and California has a number now. Looks like New York and Illinois have the most. So these are coming from the census, 1840, 1880, 1920. Spatial resolution is the state. Name variants are treated separately. We can see its absolute countings. They're not comparing the population of New York or California. It's colors, and you can mouse over as opposed to the actual legend and get the actual numbers. Okay, what about global coverage? And this is the big bad one on the block, more or less, Forebears.io, a global surname analysis. And their records, they say they have about 4 billion people, which is a little over half the population of the planet in 2014, 27 million forenames, and 27 million surnames. So you can also look at forenames if for some reason you want to do that. In addition to the surnames, under names have their choice of searching forenames, surnames, a baby name generator, and the most popular names. So is this really global? Subjected to the Wang test. Regardless of what Sheldon Cooper on Big Bang Theory says, Lee is not the most popular name. Wang is. So I just said, okay, show me where you have all the Wangs. And it does seem to be a pretty good global representation. They're missing Libya for some reason. It looks like the Emirates, they don't have it. Maybe a couple parts of the Philippines. All in all, looks like pretty good global coverage. So then I can put in Meisner, and it'll tell me how common the name is. And there's about 9,788 guitar pickers in Nashville. Oh, wait, that's a different song. They have about, oops, where'd it go? 9,000 records, and you can see the distribution. And most prevalent in the United States, that's total numbers. And the highest density, the number per thousand population, is in Denmark. You can see at the top, it does suggest a couple alternate spellings, and you get a test on flags. What are the flags of the various countries? You can actually pull up a table of phonetically similar names, and this is their similarity index. Then they tell you how many people have that spelling of the name. And then in terms of the prevalency, first absolute, which has the most, and then relative, the most dense occurrence. So if these alternate spellings, we can see Chechnya has the most with that particular spelling. Germany, of course, has the double S. And then the most with the Meisner, the most people are found in the United States, but the most per thousand of population are in Poland. How are you doing on the flag test? What's next? Hungary. Then we have Latvia for the Meisner with the E stuck on the end. And there's 20 whole people with that. Canada that we have. And finally, Monaco has a number of Meisners, Meisner. So it gives you that kind of information. Now you can also drill down and be more specific. You can click on a nation, and I'll start with doing the United States. And then at the bottom here, I've picked regions, and that's their definition of states. So now I can see from the records they are using where the Meisners are most found in the United States. And if I click on Texas, it tells me in their records they have 129 of us, and we're ranked 19,266. There's one for every 244,000 Texans. Now, where are they getting all this information? And they're essentially beating the books and anything and everything they can find. So you really can't tie these names to a particular record. You have everything from naturalization records as back as 1790 to the divorce index of 2011. So you can't assign a particular time or time period to these names, just where has the name appeared. And the way to find that is you can go in, you can at the bottom for genealogical resources, or use this URL with the resources, and then you can see all the different kinds of records, and you can look to see what do they have in terms of obituaries or wills, and then you could do nations, or even drill down as I did to Texas to see exactly what records are they getting for that particular nation or region. Their subregions for the United States are counties, and you can see Tarrant, Dallas County. This is the absolute frequency, the total number of people. We can also look at the frequency, choosing that down here, the relative frequency, and then you can see in the rural areas, it sort of picks up as the numbers per thousand population as opposed to total. And you can see this sort of German belt across the northern half of the country, where people came into the East Coast and then gradually went west. So what can we say? It's all kinds of different sources over various time periods. You can drill down to the county. As best we can tell, there really are not business names. They treat the variants separately. You can look at both absolute and relative frequencies, and it's coded by color. And then you can always mouse over to get the actual number or percentage of that location. Now, in some of the other lists that I'll show you of where you can find surname maps, they've been a little bit dated, like the one on family search, and you'll discover you click on what you think is going to be a surname map and it takes you to MyHeritage. Well, MyHeritage has absorbed some of the former sites that used to do surname maps and have their version here, which, as we can see, is going to be a little bit coarser than some of the others. Is it a global data set? There's my Wang test. And what you can see is, well, they really don't have anything in Africa, Saudi Arabia. They're missing parts of South America. So I'd say it's probably not a global data set. It's really about 26 countries are well represented. It will suggest some first names that go with the last name and some of the family trees they have on MyHeritage that have those names. So it's a question of how many people who surname Wang are actually members of MyHeritage. And there's not all that many. If I do my Meisners, I can see there we have the United States has the most. It had followed up with Central Europe, a couple in New Zealand. So it's getting it from their on MyHeritage. So again, it's various time periods. The spatial resolution is only the country, so it's rather coarse. It gives you absolute frequencies only and as a mouse over. So of the two global surname websites, the previous one, Forebears, is probably the better one to use. Now we can zoom in on particular countries. If we look at Europe, Australia, United States, there's a site called GeneNet, and I'm not terribly familiar with it. This is again members. They say they have about 4 million members, but surprisingly only 1.25 million family trees. I would expect more trees than people, but you can look at the origin of your last name. So instead of the Wang test, I'll give it the Smith test. And you can see this is really kind of limited to places that are what, Anglo-Saxon, the British Empire, or the like. They actually have certainly Central Western Europe, the US, some in South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, but probably don't have much for other places. And again, this depends on who are the members who have submitted treaties, not really global coverage. Here I can look at my Meisner name. We can see they're centered on Germany and in the United States, particularly starting in New York, Philadelphia. Now, one of the things it does have is you can select time periods with the slider bar. So before I was showing you all the time periods, this is the case. I'm looking for Meisners in the 1700s and 1800s. At the bottom, it tells me places where they're finding it the most from the family trees that have been contributed to this site. And it also showed me the names of some of the members who have quite a number of that particular surname. So if I expand it out, look at all the time periods, and it spreads out a little bit more in the more recent years into the Midwest in the US. And then I can sort of zoom in on Germany and see that. The one problem with that, there's no legend. What constitutes light green is more people, but how many more we really don't know. And we can zoom in even a bit further. It's not just arbitrary. I got Schweinfurt in the middle of the map. This is my Meisners. This is where my ancestors came from. So it doesn't really draw your eye to that because there weren't that many of us there compared to some of the other locations. So again, this is coming from the trees that have been submitted. Gets down to a municipality. It's sort of a finer spatial scale, but you'll have to cross-reference this with a map in most cases to figure out exactly where you're looking. It does suggest name variants but they're treated separately. It's only absolute frequencies, and we can see there is no legend. So now where are we finding all these surname maps? Of course, the first place you look for anything in terms of genealogy is Cindy's list. I took a class from Cindy 2 years ago, so I don't want her putting a curse on my family tree if I don't remember to mention Cindy's list. The Family Search Wiki has a big list of names, as does the International Association of Genetic Genealogy. But both of these I've discovered are dated. So this is the ones you would find on Family Search. And like I say, you click on some of these, the links are broken, and some of them will take you now to MyHeritage, who sort of absorbed whoever was making those maps. And on the International Societies Wiki as well, they have links, but again, a couple of these are dated. But now you have my handout, again, available, and put a link to it in the chat, and it's on our site off the Dallas Genealogical Society website. And it's 3 pages. I sort of group by countries, and I've added in a lot of this research I've done over several months to add this additional information so you don't have to try to dig through to find it. I am copywriting these and ask you to respect the copyright and don't just go hand this out willy-nilly and like the local societies have me come and talk to them, and then I can share that with them. But there's a lot of work that's gone in to producing this. This is the most complete and current listing that I know of. So what about Germany? Okay, the first one we can look at is actually not a website. This is a series of books. This is a very intense academic study that a couple of universities there have gotten together and done. So it's 6 volumes. They finally published the 6th volume. It took them about 10 years to get them all done. These are scholarly publications. Each volume costs about $500. And if I look up, there are no libraries near us that have them. But you can see a couple sites, a couple maps that have been shown on the web. What they mention is they're not creating maps of a single surname. They're studying the sort of evolution of surnames. So here you can see color-coded. The blacks are the Gerhardts that end with a DT. The reds are the Gerhards that end with a DS. The blues are the ones that end with a TZ, and the greens are the ones that end with just a Z. So you can see particularly the ones with just a Z is a lot more localized as where those names might be found. And this is from the 2005 phone books. So why they're doing this study, they're looking at different variations of names, the Schroders versus the Schneiders, the phonological sound alike, the Hausers, Weisers, and patronyms, Peterson, Peters, Peter, all those aspects. And they say based on the current distributions, and that's what they're working on, you can draw some conclusions even back into how people were speaking in the medieval days. This one's a book, not a website. All the rest are websites. They get this from the 2005 telephone directory. If you've been looking at phone books recently, the trend in phone books is they're getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner as we all go to cell phones and keep our number as we move all around the country. I had one colleague who was from my hometown of Pittsburgh, and he was living in Anchorage, Alaska, with his 412 area code from Pittsburgh. So the newer phone books are not of as use as the older ones were. They're only showing absolute numbers, but they do have the pie charts and legends, and there'll be a big narrative that goes with any of these. Okay, what about websites? Christopher Stoppel, who is not a genealogist, as best I can tell, he's a computer programmer and likes to play with code, has some neat maps. This is the absolute variation, absolute counts of Meisners. and 791 of them in Germany in recent years. Or we can look at the relative distribution of those with the double S, and you can see they're sort of centered, particularly in what was formerly Eastern Germany. So it gives you some little clues to how is the name spelled, where you might want to look. This comes from the 2005 telephone directory. He does go down to the Landkreis. It's only family names. As we can see, Meisners with single S and double S are treated separately. You can do either an absolute or relative frequency. He does it in colors, and there is the legend, as you can see there next to the map. He also has, when you go through and put in the name, here you can see you can get the absolute and relative maps. He has this thing called left, and this is where you get some alternate spellings. He will suggest a couple when you put a name in here, or if you put a name in that he doesn't have on the list, wasn't in the phone book, he will suggest a couple names. And then, and I'll show you, and I have links to these on the table as well, of neighboring countries' surname maps, and then a couple other references as well. That's all under this left choice on this version. He has another version. Said he's a computer programmer and likes to play with code. This is what his more recent version is. You can access both, one or the other. And this map is actually interactive. It's like if you play with Google Earth, you can put your mouse on it and click and rotate it around in all sorts of different directions and play with it. Or indicating the numbers. You type the name just into the prompt there. I don't find that as useful, other than a couple places stick out. You can see Berlin for sure sticking out here. He does have this little map on the left, if you click, and there you have one choice of doing either an absolute or a relative distribution of the names, and you can see the difference, the influence of urban areas on absolute. There's a lot more people that live in Berlin, so therefore there'll be a lot of Meisners there, but relative to all the other people live in Berlin with all their names, it's not as common as, say, up here in the Unterfranken of Bavaria. So the relative maps are often more useful, relative frequencies, than the absolutes. He gets these from the 205 telephone directory, gets down to reasonable spatial resolution. You can do both absolute and relative frequencies, and you can either use the bar version or the colored versions, and does have a legend. Now, this is one that's sort of similar. This is on Ancestry's German site. You do not have to have a subscription to Ancestry or Ancestry's German site to access and use these maps. You just go in and put in the name for some URL, and in fact, you can put in the name and you can get both absolute and relative frequencies. And you can see the coloring, pretty good. We see Berlin pops out. These are my Meisners as well. Here down in the Schweinfurt, where my Meisners came from in Bavaria. I sort of like the colors a little bit nicer. I'll show you a comparison with Christopher's in just a moment. This is from the 2002 telephone directory. Now you can also get the digital dictionary here, nameforschung.net. Oh, I should point out, when you're going to the German Ancestry site, you put in that URL, a page will come up and say, you're in the United States. Don't you want to go to the American version? And you want to say, no, I want to go to the German one, and then go there. So that's all you need to do. So here again, we're comparing Meisner with the single S to the Meisner with the double S on their site. They use the little circles, and you can see they're getting down to sort of a municipality. This is also from the 2005 telephone directory, but they're going down to the resolution of the postal districts. However, you'll have to cross-reference this with a map of Germany to figure out the actual location of any particular place. It's only absolute frequencies, and there is no legend available. Here's our next site, the Karte Namen. You saw one of these in Belgium already. People have used this code in a number of different European countries, and it's just the size of the circle is what they're using. These are my Meisners. This is from telephone directories of the 1990s, again, down to municipalities. The variants are treated separately, and the size of the circle, which in places like here we can see is probably useful. On the Belgium map, remember when I showed you there were circles and circles and circles, and you'd have to zoom in if you can to figure it out. Here's a site that comes from the big site that hopefully all of you are familiar with, for genealogy.net. You have two different choices. You can look at 1890s, and that's a plot, in this case, the Schmidts in green, 1890s. This is derived from the casualty list from World War I. And they figured anybody who was a casualty was probably about in their 20s in World War I. So they arbitrarily assigned 1890 to the date. They had the names and locations, but these are just soldiers who were casualties. And then you can also do from the phone book of 1996 in red and do the same sort of thing. So now you have two different time periods you can compare with, which can be useful. And you can add alternate names and alternate variant spellings as well, and just add and add as you want. You have some control over what you're plotting. So I say for 1890, that comes from the World War I casualty list. The 1996 is from the telephone directory. It is the towns. These are, best I can tell, just family names, not businesses. It's only absolute, not relative frequencies, but you get an idea from the density of the dots because the resolution is rather high in terms of towns, but there is no legend as such. Now, one thing you may want to ask is what happened to all the Schmidts that used to live in Poland and Bohemia that are all there in greens in the 1890s, but they don't show up in 1996? Stop and think about that for a minute. Look at the reds, and you see the outline of the current state of Germany. In 1890, we had Prussia. So did all the Schmidts just leave Poland? No, there's still thousands of Schmidts in Poland. And here's one example of a Polish surname map. And we can find there's 1,300 of them here and 800 of them there. So again, you have to pay attention when using the map. Where are they getting the data? How do I use it? Okay, so let's just compare these different German maps. You get a feel of what you might want to use. These are absolute frequencies of my Meisner name. On the left is Christopher Stoppel's Geogen site, and on the right is my ancestry site. It's just a difference of a couple years in the phone books, and you can see all in all, it's just about a 1-to-1 match. The advantage of the Geogen is you can also do a relative frequency. Okay, Forebears, remember that's the global site. We have no idea what time period. This is anything and everything they could find. Again, you can go on their website and look under resources and see exactly what they use. And they have everything from prisoner war records and concentration camp records and baptisms and the like. So they don't really quite have the same resolution to pick up Berlin, but a number of the other locations are showing up reasonably well, but things are a little bit different because this is a lot of different time periods involved. Here's the Karte Namen, the one with the circles. And you can see a little bit finer resolution, just about the same time period. Here's the NVK.net, that's the 1996 phone book. And this is the GeneNet, and I used their slider bars to just look at the 19th century, or 20th century. I'm sorry. They sort of get Berlin, but doesn't quite highlight it quite as much. Got some down here in Würzburg as well. But give you a feeling of the different ones. Now, what about the neighbors? Okay, we saw Christopher Stoppo already suggested a number of the sites. I have them on my list as well. Here you can see Meister I chose, not as many Meisners. And you can do both absolute and relative distributions for Austria. For Switzerland, the Swiss telephone directory. And it is the telephone directory. And we have Bern in the center, and I can zoom in and I can get the actual name, address, and phone number of the person. Definite proof that Switzerland is not part of the European Union, because the European Union recently passed that privacy law, and there's no way you can find this sort of stuff for Germany per se. You can find the older phone book, but that might be about it. So that lets you zoom all the way in. In France, we have a couple. You have to watch how you use this. These are the Schmidts, so we can see they're up close to the border. Also, the rain. These numbers here on the map are the number of their departments. That's the geographic area. So I look over here at the table, and Mosul is number 57. Here's 57, and they have 766 Schmidts. They have a choice of 4 different time periods you could look for. So you can look for the older records, is what I did here, or you could look to more recent ones. But then we have area 67, this is the lower Rhine. Remember, the Rhine goes from south to north, so 68 is the upper Rhine, that's upriver, and some few of them there. Here you can look at the Schmidt map of France. Problem with this site, the data come from those who are looking to find lost relatives. So the distribution shows up pretty well, but you try this now at home. This is based on the Flash player, which is now unsupported, and most web browsers have removed this. I have one sacrificial machine. I still have a Flash player on it, so I can produce the map. Sort of interesting for France, when I was teaching at the University of St. Thomas in Houston back in the 80s, we had a French professor, Madame Le Gouillon, and she had been separated from her brother after the war, World War II. And in the 1980s, France had digitized their phone records and put a little micro computer terminal in everybody's house in place of a phone book. And you could type in the name and it would give you the address and phone number of the person. When she was back visiting there, she put in her name and found her brother that she had lost contact with over 40 years before. So just a little side story of digitizing phone records from France. And again, here's that one with all the circles for France, the Schmidts again, and this is the 2005 telephone directory. You can see Paris sort of sticks out there as well. Okay, if we look at Belgium, you can do both relative frequencies and absolutes, and you can pick 2 different time periods, 2008 or 1998. So you have the choice here, and you can even pick some of the different colors that you want. And you can sort of click on the map and it'll tell you how many in that particular location. So that's for Belgium. And then here's the circle version as well. But see, that doesn't really tell you how many or where, as we saw on the alternate website. In the Netherlands, you get 2 choices. You can from the 1947 census, tells me there were 125, and tells me in each province how many there were in the 1947 census. Again, you can look at alternates as well. And in 2007, see, I can choose to do both the S and the SZ versions of Meisner, which I did, and this is their 2007 map. And sort of zoomed in, and again, you can sort of click and it'll tell you the actual number of votes. Here we have Poland. From the phone directory, we saw the Schmidts before. These are the Meisners. There's 256 there, and then it'll break it down into smaller geographic regions and how many names there are. And as long as the ancestors didn't move too much, in the case of Poland, a lot of people left, a lot of people moved in, a lot of people left again. And there's the Jewish records for Poland as well. And these are trees. If you look at the icon they're using and the size of the tree, and it's records over the 1830s to 1840s. And then we have the Czech Republic, the Minister of the Interior, because they have civil registration there. You can go through and look. These are my distribution of Meisners. And it'll even tell me how many they had year by year in recent years. So we're picking up. And we can see how many were born with that name as back as 1931. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not that common a name. So the 4s and 5s were sort of years where there are a couple more Meisners born. So what do we do with these maps now that we got them? One of the things, you may have a surname you're researching that has a geographic location. So here's one example, the Essers. And if I plot the Essers, either looking at the absolute distribution or the relative distribution, it tells me here there's 9,000 of them nowadays in Germany, some in Berlin, but a lot of them over here in the North Rhine-Westphalen area. And in that area, per million, there's about 3,000 per million. So you can see it's pretty concentrated. So if you're researching that name, you'll probably want to look here for records. And in fact, we can see how it's expanded over time. Going back to this site, look at the 1890s, and then it's spread out more in 1996. And again, you can pick the colors. Last time, the 1890s, I think I had them green as well then. But you see, it's sort of there's area you probably want to focus on if you had no other information. Of course, Esser means Cartwright, the wheel makers. So if you're looking for the Ponderosa Ranch and the Cartwrights, you know where in Germany to find them. Okay, what about two surnames? You're trying to find a husband and wife, and where might they have come from? If I look on my family tree, there's my great-great-grandparents, Andreas Meisner, Barbara Schenk, both born in Germany, came over in 1846, settled in Pennsylvania. So if I look at my relative distribution of Meisners and the relative distribution of Schenks, I have a couple areas I may want to focus in. Usen is one, but in the census, they said they came from Bavaria. So in fact, I want to focus a little bit more down into Bavaria. So if I zoom in there, there's the Meisners, there's the Schenks. These are relative frequencies, not absolutes. So that sort of focused me into the Unterfranken region. And in fact, that's where I came from. There's Schweinfurt again, and the little village of Pusselsheim. There's the baptismal record of Andreas. He was born in 1815 in Pusselsheim, number 26. And there's his future wife, Barbara, born October 1820 in Pusselsheim. And as we see in many cases in Germany and other parts of Europe, not everybody had married parents at the time they were born. And in fact, in this case, it even says illegitimate. Okay, so that's a way you could sort of focus in our particular region if you're trying to figure out where might they have come from. What about names of friends and associates? As I looked through all those records of the Meisners there in Pusselsheim, I was looking at the minister's name. So I have different years where I have the records. And if you look closely, there's three different handwritings here. You look at 1811, 1812, look at this first letter, the W, and then compare that to the little swirl on the end here on 1815, 1819. But then I get to 1821, and he's back to the older version of the W's. So was he changing his handwriting, or did he have a different parish clerk? I look at Myers Gazetteer. There's only 210 people, excuse me, in the town, but he must have had a different clerk at different times. But what's the name? If you look at that, W-I, well, let's use the surname map. I put in Versing and said, could that be it? And lo and behold, that's a very much localized name. And there we are in Unterfranken, right by Püsselsheim. That's where the Versing were. So that most likely is the name. And in fact, I got discovered, he wrote a book of his sermons, 1810, pointing out he was in Püsselsheim. So that sort of verified the name. So if you're trying to figure out spellings of names, put them into the surname maps and see. Here's a recent case. In fact, it was in the German genealogy Facebook group, not ours, the big one, on November 27th. And somebody said, I'm looking at this record. Is this Bern Moser? And everybody's looking. Well, there's a B-E-R and an M. I don't think there's really the N. O, is that a Z or whatever? So you go and put that in, and the best suggestion it comes up with is M-O-S-E-R. Now, it looks like written, in fact, was a Z, not an S. But remember, they wrote what they heard, which may not be it. And we discover, in fact, Bermoser is going to be the more likely name. Remember, that question was posted on November 27th. And lo and behold, by the next day, somebody, may even have been me, looked on the Surname Map site to see what might be possible as a surname. Here's one I'm still fighting with. Notice our great-great-grandparents. We have Johann Ott and his wife, Christina. And what was her maiden name? There's where the Otts come from, or live now. And they generally said Bavaria or I think Baden on the two different censuses. And the only suggestion I have of her possible surname is on my great-grandmother's death certificate. And they said, what are the parents' names? And there they said, there's the mother, is Christina. So the question is, what the heck is that? What did they even write what they heard? Now, if you look closely, she's buried in St. Mary's Cemetery. Look at the S for St. Mary's. Look at that. So that first letter is an S, and there's probably an M in there, and it may end in an R. But what might it be? So I even put that up on the German genealogy group and got a suggestion of several S-O-M-I-E-R, for example, and there are no S-O-M-I-E-Rs. Probably the two closest ones would be Summer or Sommer. Now, my dad remembers my great-grandmother. That was her death certificate, and remembers that they spoke German. She was first generation in America. So if I started looking, where were the Otts, assuming they got married there and not in Pennsylvania, and I'm not even sure of that, where might I focus? If it's Bavaria, maybe over here on the east. If in fact they were Baden. So it doesn't help me too much, but it gives me suggestions of sort of the name I might want to look for. And I've been looking at passenger lists and indexes of the Germans to America book, names that start with an S and whatever. And Summer and Sommer seem to be the best guesses. Other things you can do, because you look at different time periods and different names, where are the Geigers versus the Fiedlers? And sometimes you can see that separation between the Plattdeutsch and the Hochdeutsch. And there's even a scientific name for that line that drives through. If your ancestors had curly hair, were they Kreuses, Krauses, or Kraus? Well, that might tell you where you may want to look. Does the distribution change over time? In the case of in particular, if you're looking for the wolves in France, the loups, here we can see 1891 to 1915, 3 variants of the name. And if it's L-O-U-P, we'll probably look down here in the south. Lelou would probably look up here in the north, but that's 1891 to 1915. We look more recently, and distributions haven't changed terribly much. There's obviously more of them now. But that's the kind of thing you can do with surname maps. So surname maps give you a concentration of the residents with a name or a group of names. You can look for those, particularly that have regional distribution patterns. If you find a place where there's a lot of them in one particular location, that can be a focus for your research. If you're trying to find where did they come from, what was their town of origin. Some of the sites will give you alternate spellings, or you can use it to confirm, is that a German name? Because for my aughts, in the church records in Pittsburgh, the minister, instead of writing OTT, wrote UHY. And they've actually digitized the records. I got the digital copy. He wrote UHY. Does that sound like Ott? Is that even a name? No, you put in the surname. That's not even a name. So what he was writing, and it is UHY consistently for all their kids. I have no idea what was going on, but you can get an idea of alternate spellings. And then if you're trying to track the friends, associates, and neighbors, and we'll hear more about that in our meeting in March, the surname maps can be another useful place to go. So that's incorporating surname maps into your research. I think a couple folks have already asked questions. So I'll let Ann go ahead and tell us what we have for questions.
Well, actually, we don't have any questions in chat right now. So if anybody has any questions, please let us know. You can probably unmute yourself and ask them.
Hi, this is Susan Wilson. I sent a chat, but I sent it to Bernard, so I'm sorry. Who owns IO, and where do they get their info from? I'm just curious.
IO is a weird one. I don't know who owns it. I'm trying to think if I've gone through the about part. They got their data from any place they could find data. Like I say, you can go through and look at resources. Either just put in the IO URL/resources or scroll down to the bottom of any of their pages and they'll have a little link to geological resources and it'll show you. And then you can go country by country. Where are they getting the records? And most of them, or a number of them, even hot linked. They got things from Family Search. You can go and find there. So it looks in some cases they even scraped websites, which is kind of a not really kosher legal thing to do. So I'm not sure who they are. They got records from wherever and whatever it might be. Like I say, it can be everything from naturalization records in the 1790s to in Texas, divorces in 2011. So you can see what sources they use. They tell you that you go through the website, but that means it's all different time periods. So you really can't assign it to a particular place and time. And you can do that not only just for the United States or Texas. I went through Dwayne, who gave our talk last time, is here from Germans from Russia. And I looked to see what records they have from Russia. And you can go through and see they're not quite as many as they got from the United States. But I'm not quite sure who owns them. And they just, wherever they can find lists of names and locations, it seems like they grab them.
Well, thank you very much.
It probably even includes the kitchen sink.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
I sent you a suggestion about that last name as well.
The S-O-M-I-E-R?
No, Surmeyer. I grew up in a German community and we had Surmeyers, S-U-R-M-I-E-R. They were butchers. They owned the butcher shop. So
okay.
Food for thought, so to speak.
All right. That's one I'll go and put in and see what we can find with that. So, yeah, it's a shame that all my great-grandmother's siblings, none of them apparently knew their mother's maiden name because they either put I don't know on the death certificates or just Ott, which was their married name. So I'm still trying to find the Lutheran church records, that particular town they lived in. Again, you want to go back, learn the history of the location. It's up the Allegheny River from Pittsburgh, about 55 miles. It was the first place west of the Allegheny River, Allegheny Mountains, in the late 1840s that had made steel, and they made rails for the railroad. So they started in the late 1840s, and that's about the time my aunts got there. And then the big financial crash of 1873 took the whole company down. It was a company town, and there's just not that many people left that live there. There's still a Catholic church around, but I know they were Lutheran, and she's buried in the Lutheran cemetery, as are a couple of her kids. But where the church records are, the Lutheran church is not there anymore. And back in the 1870s, does it belong to Harrisburg or Erie or Pittsburgh? And I've even gone there, their historical library and the like, and nobody can tell me where those Lutheran church records may have gone, because they were pretty good, the Lutherans and the Catholics, if it was a German church, of asking the parents when the kids were baptized, parents, where are you from? That's how I discovered the Pusosheim, not from a surname map, but from a church record. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Bernard, this is Dwayne. I might be able to help you with an aunt name as well. There were Germans from that immigrated to what I'll call to modern day Ukraine. And I know an individual that his same name is Jeriot, been a very good researcher, and he might have some other information that might maybe not be your line or be maybe a distant relative.
Right, okay.
So I'll see if I can track him down. I haven't seen him for quite a few years, but I think he's still around.
Yeah, like I say, I got him in Western Pennsylvania in the 1850 census.
Yeah, well,
And had they first been in Eastern Pennsylvania, coming even earlier, it looks like they got married in the late 1840s, because that's what the first kids
right.
showed.
Yeah.
But
I have found in my own personal surname, I have found families in Pennsylvania that that are direct relatives to me. Their families came directly from Germany and into Pennsylvania, and there's still some that live there. And I've gone to a couple of family reunions with them, and where in my case, my line went to I'll call it modern day Ukraine.
mm-hmm.
So there might be the same situation with their outline.
Right. And I'm saying, particularly, I'm trying to find out her surname and where, did they meet and get married in Pennsylvania or in Germany or wherever they were.
Yeah.
So, okay. Anything else from anybody?
I guess I have one more question for you. Of all of the different sites that you've shown us, are all of them free, or are there fees related to that? In other words, do you have to be a member or pay for something?
No, there's only one that you have to pay. The others, like I say, even that Ancestry Deutschland site, the German version of Ancestry, you do not have to have a subscription to get to the surname map part. Okay. So other than one, and I haven't marked on the list, the table, okay, all the rest are free.
Yeah. Another benefit.
Yeah, it's great. So, go and play with them and try them. And like I say, I've done a lot of the research. I think I have a little mini book of at least 30 pages of digging through all these websites. Where are you getting your records? How did you get them? How do you use them and the like? And tried to summarize that in the table that you have available as the handout. So don't just give that away freely. That was a lot of work on my part. So
right.
But please use it for your own, as the links there. In some cases, compared to like Stoppel, when you went to that left thing and it listed the neighboring ones, his are often the ones in the foreign language. In a couple cases, they have an English version. If they don't have an English version, of course, you can use some of the web browsers will have translators. Chrome has one built in. So you just put in the URL, it comes up in the foreign language, and the whole thing says, do you want that translated to English? And you say, yes, please.
Yeah.
And there it is. So.
Well, this is really good. Thank you for putting this together. Is
Oh,
that-
sure, glad to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if not, then everybody again, check and become a member of our Facebook site. If you haven't got the handout, they're there on the website. We'll see you in March for our next meeting. Most likely still be virtual. We'll still be sheltering in place. The vaccines are starting to come out slowly but surely. But in the meantime, stay safe, and we'll see you in March.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
This has been a production of the Dallas Genealogical Society. If you're already a member, thank you. If you're not a member, please consider joining now by going to dallasgenealogy.com and clicking on the membership tab. Your membership dues will help us support the genealogy section of the Dallas Public Library, and that will allow us to continue our education and preservation efforts.